You think time is a line, a steady flow, past behind you, future ahead, and you somehow moving through the middle of it. That picture feels so natural you never question it. You imagine clocks measure time. You imagine time passes the same way everywhere. You imagine a second is a second because reality says so. It does not. That is your invention. A useful one. A human one. Because the deeper physics looked, the less time behaved like the thing you were taught to trust. It did not stay universal. It did not stay separate from motion. It did not even stay separate from gravity. And worse than that, it did not stay separate from you. You still think time is happening to the universe, as if reality unfolds inside some larger, invisible stream. But what if that picture is backwards? What if time is not the container?
What if it is not flowing? What if the thing you call now is not a feature of the universe at all, but a limitation of the kind of mind you have? That is the uncomfortable part. Not that time is strange. You already know that word, strange. Physics is always strange. No. The uncomfortable part is that your most basic intuition may be wrong at the deepest level. Not your intuition about black holes, not your intuition about atoms, your intuition about before and after, about sequence, about change, about what it even means for something to happen. And once that starts to fail, reality stops feeling like a story moving forward. It starts feeling like something far less forgiving. The illusion of a universal now you believe in a shared moment, a single now that exists everywhere. But what is happening here is happening at the same time as something happening far away. That feels obvious. So obvious, you never question it. You imagine the universe like a synchronized system. One timeline, one present moment, everything unfolding together. But that picture does not survive contact with physics because there is no universal now, not hidden, not difficult to measure. It simply does not exist. Two events that feel simultaneous to you are not necessarily simultaneous to someone else, and not because of error, not because of delay, because simultaneity itself is not absolute. Now your intuition resists this. You think there must be a correct answer. They just disagree about it. But there is no correct answer because time is not structured that way. Imagine two events happening far apart. From your perspective, they occur at the same moment, but someone moving relative to you will see one happen before the other, and neither of you is wrong. That is the part that breaks your intuition because you expected time to behave like space. You expected events to have fixed positions in time, just like objects have fixed positions in space, but time does not give you that. There is no universal slice of the universe that defines now, no shared moment that cuts across all of reality. Feynman accepted this without trying to soften it, because once you let go of a universal present, the structure of time begins to change completely. There is no global stage where everything happens together, only local perspectives, each with its own ordering of events, each with its own version of now. And once that settles in, something deeper shifts, because the idea that the universe is unfolding in a single shared moment begins to look like something your mind needed, not something reality ever provided. Time does not pass the same everywhere. You still think time has a rate, a fixed pace, a steady ticking. 1 second is 1 second everywhere. That assumption feels unshakable because your entire experience depends on it. Clocks agree, processes stay consistent, nothing in your daily life contradicts it, so you trust it, but that trust is misplaced because time does not pass at the same rate everywhere, not even close. And the reason is not complicated, it is motion. The faster you move and the slower your time passes, not visually, not as an illusion, physically.
Your clock slows down relative to someone moving differently, and this is not a small effect. At everyday speeds, it is too small to notice. But as speed increases, it becomes undeniable. Two observers, two clocks, both functioning perfectly, and yet, when compared, they disagree. One shows less time has passed, and both are correct. Now, your intuition tries to repair this. You want to believe one clock is really right, that there must be a true time underneath. But there isn't. There is no deeper timeline resolving the difference because time is not independent of motion. It is tied to it. Now imagine pushing this further, closer to the speed of light. Time does not just shift slightly, it slows dramatically. From your perspective, everything feels normal. Your thoughts, your heartbeat, your experience.
But from the outside, you are moving through time differently, slower. So now time is no longer something shared. It becomes personal, dependent on how you move. And that changes everything. Because if time depends on motion, then duration is no longer fixed. It becomes relative, context dependent, different for different observers. Feynman didn't try to make this comfortable. He followed the logic, and the logic removes another assumption. There is no universal rate of time, no standard ticking, only local clocks, each valid, each real, each telling a different story. And once that settles in, the idea that time flows evenly across the universe begins to collapse. Gravity slows time itself. You might still believe there is one place time stays stable. Even if motion changes it, even if observers disagree, you may still think, at least time itself is untouched by the world. At least it flows the same near everything. That assumption does not survive either, because gravity does not just affect motion, it affects time. Closer to mass, time slows down, not metaphorically, not as an illusion, physically. A clock near a massive object ticks more slowly than one far away, and again, both clocks are correct. Each measures time normally where it is, but when you compare them, they disagree. Now your intuition tries to resist this. You want to believe there is a true time underneath, a correct rate hidden somewhere, but there isn't. Because time is not separate from the structure of the universe. It is part of it. Mass changes space, and space is tied to time. And so when space bends, time bends with it. Now imagine this more clearly, a clock on Earth and a clock far out in space. The one closer to Earth runs slightly slower. Near a stronger gravitational field, time is stretched. Near a weaker field, it moves faster. And near something extreme, like a black hole, the difference becomes dramatic. Time nearly stops relative to the outside. So now time depends on two things, motion and gravity, which means there is no place where it behaves normally, no universal standard, no baseline you can rely on. Feynman accepted this without trying to simplify it, because once you include gravity, time is no longer something flowing in the background. It becomes part of the system itself, affected, shaped, distorted, and that removes another piece of certainty.
Because now time is not just relative between observers, it is relative to location, to mass, to the structure of space-time itself. So the idea of time as something steady, something universal, something independent, begins to disappear completely. There is no universal clock. You still want to reference something stable, even after everything, after motion changes time, after gravity bends it, you still look for one thing, a master clock, a single timeline behind everything, something that tells the real time. That assumption feels necessary because without it, how does reality stay consistent? How do events stay ordered? How do you avoid contradiction? So you imagine that somewhere, hidden beneath all perspectives, there must be a correct time, a universal clock, but there isn't.
There is no deeper layer where all timelines agree, no hidden synchronization, no master reference that resolves all differences. Instead, every observer carries their own time, their own clock, and those clocks do not need to agree, not because they are broken, because reality does not require agreement. Now your intuition resists this. You want to ask, but what time is it really? That question assumes something that does not exist, because really has no meaning here. There is no global answer, only local ones, time measured along each observer's path, each valid, each complete, but not universal. Now this creates something uncomfortable because you expected the universe to share a single timeline, one sequence of events unfolding everywhere, but that sequence does not exist. There is no single story, only overlapping perspectives, each with its own ordering, each with its own definition of duration. Feynman didn't try to repair this into something intuitive. He accepted that time is not a shared backdrop. It is not something everything happens within. It is something that depends on how you move and where you are. And once you accept that, another assumption disappears. There is no universal clock, no single time running behind the universe, only many clocks, all real, all correct, all telling different versions of reality. And once that settles in, the idea that the universe is synchronized begins to feel like something you imposed, not something that was ever truly there. Past and future are not separate. You still believe in a difference, between what has happened and what has not. The past feels fixed. The future feels open, and the present feels like the boundary between them. That structure feels undeniable because it matches your experience. You remember the past, you don't remember the future, so they must be fundamentally different. But that conclusion does not come from physics. It comes from you. Because when you look at how time is actually described, that separation begins to dissolve. In physics, time is treated as part of space-time, a dimension, not identical to space, but deeply connected to it. And in that structure, events are not appearing or disappearing. They are simply located like positions in space. Now this is where your intuition begins to fail because you expect time to flow. You expect the future to become the present and the present to become the past. But that flow is not part of the structure. There is no moving boundary, no shifting now sweeping across events, only a fixed arrangement, past, present, and future, all existing within the same structure. Now your mind resists this immediately because it feels like it removes change, like everything is frozen, but that reaction comes from how you experience time, not from how time is structured. Imagine a book. The story unfolds as you read it, page by page, but the entire story already exists. Beginning, middle, end, not being created as you read, just revealed. Your experience of progression comes from how you move through it, not from the story forming in real time. That is closer to what physics suggests. Not a flowing timeline, but a structure where all events are already part of the whole. Feynman didn't try to make this comfortable because it removes something central, the privilege of the present moment. It suggests that what you call now is not special, not fundamental, just one position among many. And once that settles in, something shifts. Because the difference between past and future, something you thought was built into reality, begins to look like something built into your perception, not something the universe itself enforces. Cause and effect begin to blur. You still trust order, cause first, effect after. That sequence feels untouchable because without it, nothing makes sense, no explanation, no logic, no structure. So even now, you hold on to it. You think time may be strange, but at least cause and effect are safe. But even that begins to weaken, not completely, but enough to make you uncomfortable because once you remove a universal timeline, once different observers disagree on what is happening now, the idea of a single shared order begins to break. Two events, far apart in space. You think one happens before the other, that feels obvious, but someone moving differently may see the order reversed, not because they are wrong, because there is no universal order to agree on. Now your intuition resists this. You want to believe there must be a true sequence underneath, a correct version of events. But for distant events, events that cannot influence each other, that correct order does not exist. It depends on perspective. Now this does not mean anything can cause anything. Physics still protects causality. You cannot send information backward in time. And you cannot create contradictions, but the global structure, the idea that everything fits into one clean timeline, is gone. What remains is local. Cause and effect still work, but only where influence is possible, where one event can physically affect another. Beyond that, the ordering becomes flexible, observer dependent, and that changes something subtle but important because you expected reality to behave like a story, one event leading clearly into the next, a single chain connecting everything, but instead reality behaves more like a network. Local connections, local sequences, but no single universal ordering tying everything together. Feynman understood this. He knew physics does not promise a clean narrative. It only defines relationships.
I.e., and once you lose a universal before and after, even the idea of a global story begins to disappear. So cause and effect remain, but only locally, only where they matter. And the rest is no longer ordered in the way you expected. The feeling of time is not time. You still trust one thing, the feeling, that sense that time is moving, right now, moment to moment, second to second. It feels undeniable. Everything else may have changed. Motion, gravity, simultaneity, but this feeling remains, so you assume it must be real. At least this part, at least the sense of time passing. But it isn't, because that feeling is not coming from the universe, it is coming from you. Your brain does not perceive time directly, it constructs it. It takes events, orders them, connects them into a sequence, a flowing sequence.
One that feels continuous, one that feels directional. But that flow is not something it detects, it is something it creates. Because your brain cannot process everything at once. It needs order, it needs progression. So it builds a moving present, a shifting now that feels like it is advancing forward, but that advancement is not happening in reality itself. It is happening in your perception. Now, this is where the separation becomes clear. Physics describes relationships between events, not experiences, not feelings, not the sensation of time passing. Those belong to the system interpreting the events, not to the events themselves. So what you call the present moment is not a universal feature of the universe. It is a local construct, a way your brain organizes information so it can function. And once you accept that, something uncomfortable happens, because the most immediate thing you trust, your direct experience of time, loses its authority. It is no longer evidence of how reality behaves, only evidence of how you experience it. Feynman did not try to protect intuition here. He let it fall, because at this level, intuition stops being a guide, and the feeling of time passing, something you never questioned, turns out to be just another layer between you and reality. Time was never what you thought it was. You started with something simple. Time flows, moments pass, the present moves forward. That picture felt complete. It gave you order, it gave you direction. It made reality feel like a story unfolding. But that picture is gone now, not adjusted, removed, because nothing you've seen supports it. There is no universal now, no shared clock, no fixed rate at which time passes. Motion changes it, gravity reshapes it, observers disagree about it, and even your experience of it is constructed. So the idea of time as a flowing river begins to collapse, not because we replaced it with something better, but because the structure underneath does not contain it. There is no flow written into reality, no moving presence sweeping across the universe, only events, only relationships between them, arranged in a structure that does not evolve the way you imagined, and that leaves you with something difficult to accept. Because if time is not flowing, if the present is not special, if past and future are not fundamentally different, then what is left? A structure, a fixed arrangement of events, not static in the way your intuition fears, but not unfolding either, just there. And your experience, your sense of movement through it, is something else entirely, not a property of time, a property of you. Feynman did not try to make this comfortable. He followed the logic to its end, and the end is quiet. Time is not what you thought it was, not a backdrop, not a force, not a river carrying reality forward, but a way of describing relationships within a universe that does not privilege any single moment. And once that settles in, you stop asking how fast time flows. You stop asking where the present is. You stop expecting reality to behave like a story moving forward. And instead, you are left with something less familiar, a universe where change exists, but flow does not, where sequence exists, but not as a universal truth, where time does not pass, even though it always feels like it does.